mentioned the economic crisis. I'm wondering, Georgia has been kind of the center in the U.S. for failed and troubled banks, and we know that Switzerland is very well versed and has a very well-developed banking system. But out of this crisis have come demands for transparency and increased transparency, and we know that the Obama administration has demanded some Swiss banks turn over the records of some American customers. Can you talk about the roots of the privacy aspect of Swiss banking and how that has maybe changed as a result of the crisis?
Let me come back to the beginning of your subject. Yes, we have an important banking system in Switzerland. The whole financial sector is for about 12 to 14% of our GDP. The banks themselves stand for 8%. So it's an important part of our economy, but it's not as big as some people think. Our main economy is producing goods, exporting. Every second Swiss franc we earn is earned abroad. And yes, we need an efficient banking system for that. UBS was most hit, not only in the field you mentioned, but also in the subprime. I mean, they lost 44 billion alone in the subprime. Therefore, the Swiss banking system did fairly well, not UBS. So we should be careful not to confuse Swiss financial center and the biggest bank and the most hit by the economic crisis, UBS. You mentioned banking secrecy, bank secrecy. Yes, it's a long tradition in Switzerland, but my government came to the conclusion that we have, everybody has to pay taxes, as we expect the Swiss citizen to pay taxes. And if banks helped citizens, for example, of the United States, to use their services to hide or not to pay, to hide money or not to pay taxes, that is not acceptable. And therefore, we decided to comply with OECD rules, in particular Article 26, so that in the future we will give, after request by the US government, also administrative assistance in cases of tax evasion. That's a big political change in our system. And we negotiated a new double taxation agreement, which is now in the ratification process, both in Swiss Parliament as well as in the Senate here. We hope that it's entering into force next year, which exactly will then comply with those rules. In the meantime, we negotiated a deal concerning UBS. In the beginning, they wanted 52,000 names. That means all bank account names UBS has with US citizens or residents in the US. We consider that as a fishing expedition, and not complying with the existing double taxation agreement. The negotiation which came out as a result is now 4,500 cases which are on the way to be screened by our tax authorities. And if, yes, fraud or the like was involved, those names will be handed over. It had a great side effect for IRS as well, because not less than 14,700, due to a large extent to the UBS case, used the voluntary compliance procedure to tell IRS that they did some things wrong and therefore are ready to pay arrears and fines, but can avoid.
They didn't want to gamble that their names will be found in the UBS registry.
Yes, so that is a thing of the past. We are very hopeful that in the future such cases can be avoided, and that again Swiss investments and American investments in Switzerland are flourishing, which is the case. I mean, we forget sometimes that Switzerland is the 6th biggest investor in the US, and that over 500 Swiss companies are generating 500,000 jobs in the US. So that's not, for a small country, not too bad.
Is there any worry that this new sea change, as you called it, would discourage more foreign investment into Switzerland?
No, I don't think so. In the long term, if you want to have a sustainable system, you cannot offer illegal things. You have to be based on existing legislation. You can not try to get people using your system because they want to hide or they don't want to pay taxes. It's not in the interest of, it's not in the long-term interest of the Swiss economy and of the Swiss government either.
Reports have emerged that executive compensation in the U.S. has gotten back to the pre-crisis levels. I mean, it seems that executives are being paid just as much or more now than they were before everything melted down. I was wondering if you could talk about the way that executive compensation is viewed by Swiss people in the U.S.
Yeah, we have a big discussion about bonus and boni payment in Switzerland too, and the two big banks already took the necessary measures to not only change their bonus system, but also reduce dramatically some of the executive payments. But I mean, it's always difficult for the individual who earned so much before to be happy with half or less. So it will be a long struggle to not only introduce it, but to keep it that way. And of course, the tendency is to go back to square one. That means, but I think the political will is there on both sides of the Atlantic not to allow that.
And this climate of oversight has also had Mr. Obama, President Obama, calling for financial centers around the world to impose different taxes on financial institutions. Do you know anything about that? I know that Switzerland rejected that.
Actually, we were contacted by the American Treasury Secretary if we would be interested to introduce the same system, to have a kind of it's basically a tax on the banks, which should allow on a mid and long term to pay back the money they got from the public sector to survive in the last 2 or 3 years. And we had a similar case with the UBS in Switzerland, which they got money from the public sector. We created a bad bank for them, where they could park all their toxic assets. So we have an interest worldwide that everybody is treated the same way, because otherwise there is an unfair competition. So yes, there are discussions. We are not yet there to say, well, we will do the same as you do, but it's probably in the common interest to talk about and find common solutions to avoid that people are running again away from one country to the other because they might get a better treatment in one or the other country.